Ja, schönen guten Morgen, meine Damen und
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm delighted that I may welcome the Secretary General of NATO to Berlin, Mark Rutte. A warm welcome to Berlin. I'm delighted that we are meeting here today. Over the last months, we've talked quite often at the NATO summit, at your first official visit to Berlin, on our joint trip to Washington. If I counted correctly, we have met for the 6th time today in these few months. And not the last time, certainly. And there are many reasons to meet. NATO plays a key role in times of huge geopolitical shifts. What is decisive is that we massively strengthen the European pillar of the alliance at full speed by substantially increasing defense spending, which is what we have agreed on at the summit in The Hague. This historic decision was made. Its implementation is happening at full speed. It is making swift progress. And for the federal government, strengthening the European pillar of NATO in security and defense policy is a top priority. The new national security strategy of the United States that was presented last week confirms our approach. We are on the right track. It is right that Germany and Europe systematically invest in their own strengths, in security policy, in migration policy, in economic policy, and in many other areas too. We do this because we are convinced it is the right thing, because it is in our own interest, not because anybody was pushing us, but because it is our interest that Europe stands on its own feet. And this is the precondition for us to preserve our way of life, our freedom, our security, and our prosperity. We are working on this at full speed, but also with sober-mindedness. That means beyond rhetoric, where we can work in our common interest together with the US. We will continue to do so these days. It is especially true for the intensive work going on regarding a possible peace deal for Ukraine. But it also pertains to the future of NATO. We will do this as a strong, united Europe. This Europe is, of course, under pressure, but we will keep it together. We will not be divided. This is more important than ever. The united and strong Europe is what we need more than ever. We will put all our efforts in preserving it and serving it. This is true for myself personally also, because this clear European compass is what we as a federal government follow, and I follow as Chancellor. We are not only limited to institutions in Brussels. Europe also is the member states, and also the UK and Norway, with whom we are closely coordinating, with whom we are closely linked, and whom we have as reliable partners within NATO. European interest is also what we defend when we meet as the E3 and with Poland, Italy, and other neighbors too. Speaking to President Trump and Mark today, we again discussed intensively on how, on the way to a ceasefire to Ukraine, we can make progress. Over the last week, we've seen the initiative of the US and seen momentum that we haven't seen since the 24th of February 2022. We are both in close contact with President Zelensky, with our European partners, but also with President Trump. As you know, yesterday, together with Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, we talked in detail with President Trump. The work that we are doing together remains very difficult for a simple reason. President Putin continues to ruthlessly continue his brutal war of aggression against the Ukrainian civilian population. At the same time, in the negotiation, he's playing for time. Against this backdrop, we have three major goals. Firstly, we want a ceasefire for Ukraine that puts an end to this horrible war after almost 4 years. Secondly, this ceasefire needs to be backed by robust legal and material guarantees, in contrast to the Minsk agreement, so this would make it a lasting agreement. And thirdly, a negotiated solution needs to preserve European security interests. It must not be to the detriment to the interests of NATO and Europe, and this is why it is so important that we Europeans are part of the process. No peace must be made without us being involved. So difficult questions are ahead, and we also agree only Kiev can decide which territorial arrangements it may accept. It would be a mistake to force the Ukrainian president into a peace that his population will not support after 4 years of suffering and dying. So we make it clear to him that we show stamina in our support to Ukraine to reach the goals that we share that I just described. In order to move forward with this work, we will increase pressure on Moscow. We will continue to increase that pressure. We will also increase our pressure on the shadow fleet. We will continue to massively support Ukraine, especially when it comes to immobilize Russian assets in Europe to help Ukraine and enable Ukraine to defend itself effectively against future Russian aggressions. All of this serves two purposes. Firstly, peace in Ukraine and for Ukraine, and security in Europe. And I would like to seize this opportunity to thank you very much for your tireless efforts as NATO Secretary General. It's truly a remarkable effort and a lot of work. You're doing this really in our interest on both sides of the Atlantic. You're doing a fantastic job. There is no other institution that ties Europe and the US so closely together as NATO. And this is why we are standing here serving the same purpose. We want freedom, security, and peace on the European continent. We want to secure it, and we want to have security for all of us. Ukraine is part of this, and thank you very much for your visit and for the work you're doing. Thank you.
Dear Chancellor Merz, lieber Friedrich, thank you for the warm welcome. It's always a pleasure to be in Berlin. At the summit in The Hague, we took the decisions to make NATO stronger, and at the core is the agreement to invest a historic 5% of GDP in defense, and this includes 3.5% for core defense requirements and 1.5% for defense and security-related investments. Germany has earmarked more than 108 billion euros for security and defense in 2026. And thank you, Friedrich, for committing to reach the 3.5% for core defense requirements in 2029 already. A truly impressive shift, demonstrating exactly the kind of resolve we need to ensure our security. Germany is leading by example and sending an important signal. A signal that Europe is ready to take on more responsibility. A signal that burden sharing is not just a slogan, but a concrete commitment. And a signal to any adversary that NATO remains strong, united and fully capable of defending our territory. Germany's contributions to the alliance are impressive. On the ground, German forces form the backbone of NATO's forward land forces in Lithuania. Furthermore, Germany provides essential troops and equipment across NATO's eastern flank. In the air, German aircraft support Baltic air policing and enhance our deterrence and defense posture. And at sea, the German Navy safeguards vital lines of communication and plays an indispensable role in protecting critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. And of course, Germany continues to be a driving force behind support to Ukraine. You are helping Ukraine defend its sovereignty today and deter future aggression. And this is vital as we continue to support the urgent efforts to bring this war to a just and lasting end. This matters not only for Ukraine, but for the security of the whole Euro-Atlantic area. As we face continued threats to our security, I'm grateful to see Germany as a leading power within the alliance, inspiring other European allies to follow. And this is crucial as we work to ensure that we can continue to deter aggression and defend our freedom and our way of life. We know we can count on Germany, and Germany can count on NATO. Lieber Herr Bundeskanzler, lieber Friedrich, ich freue mich.
Dear Friedrich, I'm looking forward to our continued cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fred Pleitgen from CNN International. Ask in English, if that's all right. First and foremost, to the German Chancellor, you spoke a little bit about your phone conversation with President Trump last night. He said that strong or harsh words were used in that phone conversation. Can you shed some light on where the friction points lie between the U.S. and the European position on a possible peace in Ukraine. And he also said the prospect was floated of him possibly coming to Europe this weekend to try and move things forward. Do you have anything on the possible prospect of that happening, or a U.S. top delegation coming over here to Europe to try and move things forward?
If you don't mind, I'm answering in German.
Indeed, we had an extensive phone call yesterday afternoon with President Trump, Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer and I, and we talked about the upcoming process over the next days. We made the suggestion that we, together with the U.S. administration, we should finalize the discussions on the documents. There is a proposal that he did not know at the time we had the phone call because it was sent to the Americans later. We did send that document in the late afternoon, and it was about territorial concessions Ukraine might accept. But this was a question that this is a question that the Ukrainian president and the Ukrainian people need to answer. And we told President Trump exactly that. So if we continue the process as we imagine it, there will be talks with the U.S. administration over the weekend, and there might be a meeting at the beginning of next week in Berlin. Whether the U.S. administration will take part in this meeting very much depends on the papers that we will work on at this time. I'm quite confident that we will succeed, and in the phone call with President Trump, I really had the clear impression that he was willing to embark on this path together with us, because he knows that the Europeans want to be heard with their own interests and have to be heard with their own interests here. This is what I made clear during our conversation yesterday, and it was a very constructive conversation. We really showed a respect for each other's points of view. Mr. Chancellor, I would like to ask a question about Russian assets. It was also a question discussed in the coalition committee yesterday evening, and we might assume that money from Germany might flow to Ukraine directly from Germany from this fund of Russian assets. I mean, there are frozen Russian assets in Germany too. Could you briefly explain? I don't know if you can. I know that the reflections have not been finalized. What is the idea? Will this have impacts on the German budget? Will there be payments from Germany from the budget, or is this only a guarantee, these Russian assets? What is the idea? Because the situation in Ukraine in financial terms seems to be very tight. Ukraine needs money quickly. How will the procedure, what will it look like? And regarding an agreement in Brussels, Mr. Costa already threatened that the discussions have to be prolonged, and this makes us suspect that positions are not yet converging. Could you say a few words on this? Well, next Thursday we have the next council meeting, and we agreed that we will might continue discussions on Friday, so that we'll really come to a solution on this topic. Ukraine has enough financial means for the first quarter of 2026, but it's also true that we have not fully financed the whole year of 2026, so additional funds will be needed in the course of 2026. The pledges we've made and that are reflected in the budget for 2026, 15 billion euros for Ukraine. That is our earmarked support for Ukraine. We also have mobilized an emergency fund, but all of this is already enshrined and decided in the budget 26. There are no other payments directly from Germany that are planned right now. We might have to give some guarantees when it comes to the use of Russian assets, and the tool that I suggested basically is a loan given from the EU budget and securitized with the Russian assets. It is an ongoing process. Talks are held at full speed. I think the Commission has tabled excellent proposals. They are also legal, that is guaranteed. The Commission and others have confirmed this. We might We hope the process will be finalized next week at the European Council, and of course, as soon as there are decisions that have an impact on the budget, I would have to inform the coalition parties in more detail than I did yesterday. And at the latest next week, I will meet the parliamentary groups, or will have the parliamentary groups of the Bundestag informed. But right now it's too early because we have not taken any final decisions yet.
English. One question first to you, Mr. Rutte. The new US national security strategy calls for ending the perception and preventing the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance. In your eyes, where is the limit to NATO expansion? And to the Chancellor, also related to the US security strategy, how worried are you that the US administration may step away from its commitment to station Tomahawk cruise missiles here in Germany next year?
Vielen Dank für die Frage, und ich denke, auch Mark Rutte sollte daraus aus seiner Sicht, aus der Sicht der NATO.
Thank you. I will say a few words, and I think Mark Rutte will also add some comments. Right now, I have no reason to doubt the agreements that we have made with the US within NATO. There are no announcements and no steps taken to dissolve the mutual security promises we've made. The US administration has also found some very positive words about the NATO alliance, some more critical words. We're analyzing it. The current response is the same that we've given for months. We know that we in Europe need to do much more for our security in Europe, much more than we've done in the past. And this became clear in the home city of The Hague, where we had the NATO summit. This is why we have taken the decisions for the 3.5% and the 5% goal. I think the US administration has also acknowledged that. And it is clear that for our security and defense, we need to do much more in the coming years than we've done in the past. The US administration is rightly pointing this need out. But I also think that there will be some difficult years ahead in general, both in security policy terms, also in economic terms. We need to become much stronger than we are today. And this was also part of the discussions in the coalition committee last night. I tried to make it clear to the colleagues that we are really witnessing a watershed moment now. Nothing is the way it was before. We're really in a different world now. We're living in a different time, and this time requires different responses than we've given in the past.
Question, as NATO Secretary General, of course, my main focus is to make sure that the alliance as a whole is safe. When I, through that lens, look at the NSS, it clearly states that the US is committed to Europe, to keep Europe safe. The US is committed to NATO, and it also acknowledges that for the whole of the alliance to stay safe, you need a strong cooperation within NATO between the European allies and Canada and the United States. And indeed, as the Chancellor was saying, when you then take a look at the NATO summit in The Hague, it has been President Trump consistently, when he was Trump 45 and now Trump 47, pleading for European allies and Canada to do more. In The Hague we did. We decided collectively to go to this 5%, including the 3.5% on core defense spending, which equalizes the spending in Europe and Canada with what the US is spending. And this has been since the 1950s, since Eisenhower, a big irritant on the US side. They have always been committed to NATO, but they also had the expectation that we would spend more, that we would at least spend the same as they are doing. Not only because we want all to spend the same, but because we have to do it to reach our capability targets, to make sure that we can fight the Russians if they would attack us. And of course, we also have the huge build-up in China. So you see Europe stepping up. And here again, Germany is taking the lead. The fact that Germany has decided to reach the 3.5% in 2029, 6 years before 2035, is huge. It is a staggering amount of money Germany will spend on its defense, but it is also a clear call to arms for all the others in Europe to do the same. And then when you look at Europe stepping up, we have seen Pearl, which is buying from the US defense base to deliver weapons into Ukraine. Again, Europe and Canada stepping up. We have seen it with the coalition of the willing under European leadership to make sure that when there is peace in Ukraine or a long-term ceasefire, that we can keep Ukraine safe going forward. And then more recently, when you take a look at the Baltics, what happened there with the cutting of undersea sea cables, when you take a look at the eastern border as a whole with the reckless airspace incursions from Russia. So Baltic Sentry and Eastern Sentry, the names of these two missions. Again, it is Europe, including Germany, delivering the bulk of the troops necessary there, be it air, land or sea. So I think we are stepping up, and this is what is seen in the US, and this is recognized, and this is exactly what President Trump asked for, and Europe is doing it.
Herr Bundeskanzler, können Sie...
Mr. Chancellor, could you spoke about the European commitment before and a strong Europe. In this context, how can we understand your remarks that if the US no longer wanted to work with Europe, they should at least stick to the partnership with Germany? Well, that's very easy to understand. I pointed out that the European Union, as an institution, apparently is not categorized the right way in Washington. During my visit in Washington, I tried to explain to President Trump the history of the EU, but the US administration still finds it difficult to understand the EU as a strong union. I can understand, because what we do on the European side is unique. It is something that has never existed in the international community before. So if the US administration has difficulties to speak with this institution, the European Union, then I said at least it should talk to individual member states, among them Germany. Of course, we traditionally have great relations with the United States, and I'm willing and ready, also on behalf of other Europeans, to talk with the US administration to address topics that we need to talk about in the interest of the freedom of security of our continent, and this is how it should be understood. Thank you.
So.